So, starting out, why public program evaluation is important. So, there's this idea of a market test when you're dealing with private sector public goods and services and things like that. The idea is if somebody's willing to pay for something, they obviously value it, at least at that level, if not more. And what's different about public programs is that one is involuntary if you're using taxpayers' money. And this, what I'm talking about here, and everything we're discussing, can apply to any area of social policy, like domestic government programs, domestic charities, international aid, anything like that. What it all comes back to is that programs don't always function exactly the way they were designed. Sometimes they don't do the good that they were claiming to do, and sometimes they can actually do harm. And so this is kind of the idea that we need to have a different system than we can use in business or anything like that to evaluate whether something works, whether something is helping people, and whether we're getting our money worth out of it. Yeah, so just real briefly then, these are kind of the basics of program evaluation. First of all, I don't know if you guys have taken statistics classes or anything like that may have touched on some of these issues, but do you guys have any ideas about this? Do you have any ideas about, like, I don't know, what you may need to know, for instance, to figure out whether a program works? Figure out any example, like education program, what would you need to know about? Yep.
Figure out what the purpose of the program is, and then the target audience, and maybe evaluate the circle.
Right. Because this whole idea that I'm tossing around of works, right? You got to define what it means to work. Are we talking about test scores, or are we talking about college enrollment, or are we talking about, low-routine pregnancy rates, or whatever? There's lots of different outcomes that we're looking for. So one of the ways that you do this, like the gold standard in this idea, is a randomized control trial. Don't worry about any of these terms, but this is what they use when they're doing drug trials, when they're trying to figure out if something works, which is kind of the highest stakes level of experimentation. You don't want to kill people when you're trying to save them. So that's the idea. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to compare two groups of people that are alike in every other way other than the program, or the treatment, as they call it, this kind of thing. And so the idea is establishing cause and effect to figure out if the program is doing what it's doing. So randomized control trials, you take two groups of people that are, am I telling you things you already know, by the way? No? Two groups of people, ideally, they're absolutely identical. You put one group of people in the program, you leave one group out, that's your control group, and you look at them after the program. And maybe you look at them 10 years after the program, so depending on the type of program.
So can anyone, from what Justin already told us, have any ideas? Does anyone have any ideas about what would make a good program evaluation?
Establish a reasonable, fairer, what am I trying to say?
You want a large confidence interval, I think is what you mean?
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Did I see someone else back here? Okay, yeah, those are all right. Those are all good things. So you also, like, on a very basic level, you just want the evaluation to be useful. So usually if you're evaluating a public program, it's a program that uses taxpayers' money. So you don't want to evaluate a program that's going to waste their money. So you want the study to be credible, you want it to be useful, and you want it to be timely. So if it takes too long, by the time you get the result of the evaluation, then it's probably irrelevant at that point anyway. And maybe the program has changed substantially or something along this matter. And if you don't do the study in a way that can be like replicated or like follows proper procedures, then it's not credible. And so then you just also wasted your time. So you want the evaluation to have utility. You want it to be feasible, so it needs to be practical, cost effective, and politically viable. So they sound worse than they are, so they're actually really easy to understand. I'm looking at them. Resentful demoralization of the control group. That sounds like very frightening. But actually, the control group, it's like when the control group reacts in a way because they realize that they're not getting a treatment, so they underperform. And then in the same way, compensatory rivalry of the control group is when they overperform because they want to be like the treatment group. So like in testing, like if you know that you're in a control group and like you haven't received this high quality education, then you might have studied a lot before you take the test. And so then you perform better on the exam without the treatment, even though you were in a control group. So those sound like probably the most frightening, but they're easy. Did you
I was just wanting to clarify. So I really don't want the control group to figure out that they're the control group.
Okay. So, who can tell me about Tom's shoes and maybe why they're famous other than their shoes smelling really bad?
Tom's shoes is known for like if you buy a pair of shoes, supposedly they donate a pair of shoes to a kid that's in need
You're skeptical.
I know they don't. I researched this in another class.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Well, please chime in with anything good that I missed. Then, because there are all sorts of problems with this. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why they're famous, and they're not a nonprofit. They're actually a private business, and they're doing really, really well. Sell their very, very cheap small shoes for $50 a piece. There's a pair of shoes given away to someone. A lot of African nations, but also a lot of South American nations and things as well. So really all over the place. I think there are 51 countries total. I think there are shoes too. And the founder, Blake Mikowski, says that it's now up to 15 million pairs of shoes given away. So yeah, there are some issues with this. So yeah, look at that. Who can argue with those guys? Those are school kids in El Salvador, and El Salvador is actually the location of the study that I'm going to be talking about. But yeah, this is what they'll do. Often they'll work with giving partners, what they call them, an organization on the ground in the country, and they'll be giving them away through schools, they'll be giving them away through other organizations. So some of the criticisms that have emerged, some have been related to the giving partners. In some cases, there have been evangelical groups that they've partnered with that are actually tying attendance to religious schools to giving away shoes.
My mom, she works in advertising, and she actually does advertising for Tom's shoes. That's one of her clients. And so I've actually met the guy who does Tom's shoes, and he's an awesome guy, and his intentions are very pure. But I met the guy before I knew anything about Tom's shoes. So I used to be like a diehard Tom's shoes fan. I used to have like 5 pairs. I had like my ones I decorated and all this stuff. It's really crazy. But now after cause Tom's shoes, they kind of like you said, there's a lot of like skepticism within their studies and kind of like how they conducted their own study. And I feel like there was a lot more control over the study than what they said there is. So I mean, you kind of touched on everything, but yeah, I mean you touched on everything.
So I looked into fair trade. So does anybody know what fair trade is?
I know a little bit about it through Starbucks during my day. And I don't know if it still is, but we at least used to have one type of coffee that was certified fair trade out of all of the ones. And so I was talking to my uncle, who's a really big coffee fan, and I was like, Starbucks is, great in all these ways, but man, Starbucks sells a lot of coffee, and only one of the kinds of coffee is fair trade, and that's so stupid, and Starbucks needs to be better about it. And he said to me that it's not that easy because fair trade, there's a huge process involved, and sometimes the process gets in the way of the intention. And so it's not necessarily that the coffee that's fair trade is produced incredibly more ethically than the other coffees, and also if it is, it's a huge process to lots of people working. Yeah.
And it's not just coffee. I think coffee is one of the first things that they started. Yeah, bananas is another really popular one. In the study that I looked at, they also looked at flour sales. Okay, yeah, sorry. So fair trade is just it's a label that they put on products saying that the producer was paid a fair amount, and if the product was produced in a sustainable and ecological way. So if you're talking about coffee, that a lot of times in the regions where these things are made, especially with like bananas. It's a really low income area, and so big corporations like what's the banana branch? You know, bananas or something. Yeah, Dole. Yeah, they could go in and they to these marginalized communities and sort of offer them like below market value and take advantage of these communities, and then they end up forcing them to overproduce on the land so that it's really unsustainable. But these communities are so poor that they really have no choice. So fair trade is in an effort to sort of like combat that and to ensure that everyone along the supply chain is receiving like a fair price for the product that they're producing, as well as it's not being forced to produce the product in a way that's eventually going to harm the place where they have to live in. So again, good intentions about on the outset. And what obstacles would exist in creating evaluation?
What is fair?
Yeah, how do we define fair?
Same property. What is living?
Yeah.
Living.
Yeah. How about like who are you going to compare it to? Like, how do you find the proper control group? How do you control for not having fair trade? Okay, so these are all also problems that this study that I looked at had as well. And it was done by the Center for Evaluation, which is a Germany-based research company essentially, but it was funded by Fair Trade International. So, and then it says that like right on the front, like very big, funded by Fair Trade International. So it goes back to like what Justin was saying, like maybe it's transparent, maybe it's not. They also didn't include, but okay, I'm getting into myself. So they used what's referred to as a quasi-experimental design. So because they couldn't randomly assign people to either be in a fair trade cooperative or not be in a fair trade cooperative, they found all of these different groups of across Africa, Asia, and Latin America that were already certified fair trade, and then they found groups that were beginning the process of certification. And then so they used the people that were beginning the process of certification as their control group, and then they used the ones who already were certified as the treatment. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. As the control group. And then they used what's called a matching procedure. So they matched the characteristics of the two groups to make sure that there's balance amongst them, and so that they could be properly compared. I didn't sound exciting. Yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly what happens. And then maybe they controlled for that by ensuring that like they were really at the beginning, so it was going to take a long time. They didn't really specify the length of the study, so maybe that wasn't an issue, but that's a good problem to note. So basically, they wanted to understand the impacts of fair trade on poverty reduction and rural development. So like another part of fair trade is that the extra money that these farmers you're getting, you tend to pay more for fair trade products. And they say that extra money will go back into these communities for development or education programs or so they have this impact chain that they were looking at, and I realize it's kind of blurry, but it's drawn kind of deeper. So they found that it did have positive effects for rural development. It improved the living circumstances of workers and small-scale farmers, and it increased levels of saving and investment activity on the part of small-scale farmers and workers. And that's great. And we already talked about there's probably potential bias in the reporting because they were evaluating, the money was being funded by Fair Trade International, which has an interest in promoting their organization. And then they also don't have a lot of quantitative data, so there was no table for me to actually see that the treatment and control groups had balancing characteristics. They didn't explain the regression analysis that they used. They also kind of only touched on the matching procedure that they used, but they didn't really go through it in detail. So there's really no way for like somebody outside looking at this study to verify what they had said. Okay, so we also have a blog.